Okay, we're going to go ahead and start, I think, then. Welcome to a holiday edition of our monthly Speaking of Art program. Because it's the time of year when Horizon House traditionally has a model train display, we thought it might be fun to learn something about the art of railroads and train travel. At the suggestion of Ted Borchert, a fellow resident and a lifelong lover of trains and the joy they can bring to young and old, we are honored to hear from J. Craig Thorpe, an artist who has built a career on the fascination that he and Ted share in train travel. Craig is, believe me, I have already learned Craig knows a lot about trains. And he is both an artist and a historian of railway art. He's also something of a philosopher on the subject of railroads and American society. Looking into his book, which is available up here, and his art is available on this side if you want, afterwards, if you want to peruse it more closely. Looking into his book, it occurred to me that Craig's art is a special sort of portraiture. Like a portrait, it pictures the grace and beauty and power of the subject, of the machine, and the grandeur of America that train travel can reveal in a way that no flyover can come close to. Like a good portrait, it also presents an inner vision of what is inside that travel, of what travel by railroad can be, an experience filled with human scale connection and a sense of community. We have tables up front with his posters and paintings. You're welcome to study them in fine detail, and you'll be impressed with his skilled illustrations. And I have to mention that PBS has a short video profile of Craig, which will give you further close-up on the way his art draws you to the special experience of trains. Just search on PBS KBTC profiles and trains in paint, or on PBS and J. Craig Thorpe. Craig has also brought copies of his book on railway art. Please feel free to talk to Craig after the question and answer on how you can acquire a copy of that book. In Craig's hands, railway art is art with a message, that the Polar Express isn't the only train that can give you a magical experience. Craig.
Thank you. And I must say, John, thank you for that. And there's not much more I can say, so thank you for being here today. Well said. Thank you very much. Well, it's a treat to be here today. In part of a former life, so to speak, I was pastor at First Presbyterian down the street before the Almighty moved me out of parish work and said, "You're going to be an artist again." And I kind of balked at that, but guess who won the argument? At any rate, during those years, I was here at Horizon House to visit people, have lots of meals over here. So there's sort of a homecoming-esque kind of feel that I have. And those are all positive memories. So I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad I'm here. So we're going to start this today with a question. Well, how many of you had trains around the Christmas tree when you were kids? Yeah, and some of you probably still do. John pointed out the train in the lobby here when we came up from the garage. There's just something about a train, right? Well, it's that something that we're going to get into this afternoon. I'm going to take a look at that. And by way of just sort of some introductory kind of stuff, look at the title of this talk today, Companions, Railroads, Art, and the Confident Civic Life. So there's definitely more than Thomas the Tank Engine or other kinds of expressions of railroads. Trains do more for us than just move us around and move our stuff around. And this is the one thing I want you to take away from today. You can look at the pictures, you can ask me questions, you can buy the book and read the book, but the main thing I want you to take away from this is this fact, that railroads do more than just move us and our stuff. They actually contribute to the confident civic life. And the irony is that art helps us understand that. So, is that a simple enough thing to take away? More than mobility, railroads contribute to the health of our culture, the confident civic life. So, the painting that is there on the screen at the moment is a piece that I revised once. It was originally commissioned by Amtrak. You'll see it in another iteration a little later as this show goes on. And it shows Amtrak's Empire Builder at Glacier National Park. The Empire Builder train is one that I have painted many times for Amtrak. And in the second half of this program today, you'll see that show up quite a bit. The first half of what we're going to do here today is some background. I'm getting a little bit about me, a little bit about my story, and a bit about how railroads used art. So there's going to be this historical and sort of quasi-philosophical touch to the first half. Then the second half is all my work, and you'll get to sort of apply what I said in the first half to the second half. So that's where we're going. So I'm putting together words that most people wouldn't even dream to put together. Railroads, art, and the confident civic life. Oh, really? Yes. And so what I'm saying is kind of a step beyond the expected. And so it's going to take a little bit of work on all our parts to think through this and its implications for our culture. So we start with that word art, railroad art. Really? We don't see any railroad art around, do we? It isn't part of our common, ordinary passings in and out of places and spaces. No, but it was. So I'd like to see a show of hands here for a moment. How many of you remember seeing lots of railroad ads decades ago in magazines and newspapers? Yeah, good high percentage. That's right. Railroads capitalized on art when they could well have used photographs to tell their story, and they did, and that's fine. But there's something about that railroad art that gets us into that something that makes trains special. So that's where we're going with this. And it starts with this particular image. This is a 1929-ish kind of painting for the Northern Pacific. And the title of it is Companion of Mountains, the North Coast Limited. Some of you may have ridden the North Coast Limited in its days as a Northern Pacific train. That's before Amtrak. At any rate, really? Companion of Mountains? Well, that's what the railroads were saying. They saw this relationship between their service, their equipment, the land, and culture. Yes, you might say, oh, well, a lot of it is that's just the nature of business, corporate America. Well, yeah, but, and it's the but part that we're looking at here today. There's a real story behind it. So I'm going to start with this. Here's a quote from Georgianne Geyer. The late Georgianne Geyer was a columnist, and she said, I love cars, but they are simply an amplified version of all the frustrations and confrontations of everyday life. Real subtle, right? Buses I have never liked. Thank you, Georgianne. But on a train, however, you get if you look and see. See, that's key. If you look and see. A deep abiding sense of the continuity of the processes of nature and life. Georgianne Geyer sees that the railroad has a message, but it's one that we have to work to see. particularly in this culture, and when she wrote that some decades ago. Didn't used to be that way. 100 years ago, 80 years ago, it was known that there was a connection. But we'll see more of that in a moment. So, when we talk about art as telling a story, I like to use this word allusive. I didn't know it for a long time. But it's an indirect but meaningful reference, a suggestion. And art, as I said in the second paragraph here, can never be a literal photocopy of anything. It points to something beyond itself and presents the subject as something to experience. In other words, art is very invitational. And that's how the railroads used art extensively. It was invitational to invite people on board. Now, in many cases, there was no other form of transportation. They had to use that. And art underscored that. But nevertheless, that was very much a part of what the rail promotion was about. It was invitational. So this painting that we see up on the screen here, a little bit hard to follow, that's a Northern Pacific painting. In the background is Mount Rainier. And what's happening in this painting is very fascinating. It's one of my favorite railroad paintings, and there's not a train anywhere near it. If you look at it, I don't know whether I can get this to, well, yeah, on this center screen, I'll show you. You can see this ragged edge of the trees and the mountains and the building, and of course there are the mountains in the background, but there's this pathway. The path is the invitation. The artist is inviting the viewer to take the train, the Northern Pacific trains, from Chicago to the West Coast. And then the invitation is to walk down the path of the familiar and stand on the edge of the familiar and look at something that is unfamiliar. So this was an invitation, a visual as well as a verbal invitation to people from the East Coast or Mid-America to come west, to see this grandeur, this monumentalism that was a part of the American scene. And this kind of art shows you. So this is what railroad art does. It's a metaphor for all the paintings I have. Here we walk down the path of the familiar and look at what we had heretofore not even known existed. So my story starts in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is a painting done in the early 50s by Griff Teller, T-E-L-L-E-R. Griff was an artist, worked for the Osborne Company in New Jersey. They did calendar paintings, and the Pennsylvania Railroad was the biggest contract that that company had, the Osborne Company had. And Griff painted 27 out of 31 years of calendars for the Pennsy. So when I was a kid, this was Pittsburgh. That's what I saw. The Smoky City heritage was blowing away in the wind of change. And in the early 50s, the railroads were still going strong when it came to passenger service. So this was a familiar scene kind of thing to me. I had no idea just how much railroads used art. I saw ads in magazines, but then about the year this came out, 1953 I think it was, a friend of ours gave us a copy of that calendar. And I, as a little kid who liked trains and a little kid who liked art, I thought, oh, this is pretty amazing. And a couple of years later, this particular Griff Teller painting showed up. And again, we got copies of these every year. We had tabletop copies, office desktop copies, the big ones, the ones that were 36 inches high and 24 inches across. Well, I never got to see one of those, but boy, I tell you, I would have loved to have had them. As I said a minute ago, I had no idea how much the railroads used this art. So here are a couple of quick examples. The previous, well, both of these were calendar paintings. Every year, the Pennsy, as many other railroads, issued calendars. Do you have any idea how many calendars they print a year? Anybody want to take a wild guess? These big wall calendars? 1,000, okay? Do I hear 1,000? 2,000, 3 million. Well, it's somewhere between the two. 300,000 copies a year. 300,000. That's 15 boxcars full. But who's counting? Another example. Railroads printed timetables. And most of them printed timetables at the time in the fall and in the spring when you changed the clocks. That made sense. But not the Pennsylvania Railroad. They were the standard railway of the world. They printed calendars every month to the tune of 100,000 new ones every month. And every single one of the timetables and every single one of those calendars had art on them. And that was just for one railroad and two particulars of promotion. And when you start extrapolating out the number of railroads that were around and the kinds of art, the number of pieces of art that was out there, every day people saw the message of the railroad and what it meant to the common good, or the confident civic life, which is the phrase I'm using here today. Everybody saw it. So my career developed then to the point where I was starting to get railroad commissions. So I was starting and doing architectural kind of art. And I wanted to break into this railroad world, and that's another story at another time. But this is one of the early ones, and it shows, again, Mount Rainier, in this case, in Tacoma. This is along Ruston Way. And the train was, or the painting is to promote the Talgo trains when those were running here experimentally to see if people would really ride this in the Northwest Corridor. And of course, as most of us know, that did indeed happen and has been successful. Just a little bit of Northwest humor. If you look here, there's the paper mill back there. We all know about the aroma of Tacoma. Remember that? After this poster was released, one of my railway colleagues, who has a very dry sense of humor, came up to me and he said, I'm assuming that's a scratch and sniff poster. Enough said. At any rate, this was an early piece for me and was widely distributed and was really part of the whole development of my world. So as I was doing architectural art and railway art, I was reading, and this is just a sample of some of the books that I read. I won't even go into the details of that, but they were important in helping me understand the breadth of railroad art and how it was used. This is one of my paintings. It's a book cover by a Northwest author, Alfred Runte, Allies of the Earth, Railroads and the Soul of Preservation. I've worked together with Runte on a number of things over the years, and he introduced me to this quote by Aldo Leopold. So, show of hands again. How many of you know who Aldo Leopold was? Wow, now that's Sound County Almanac. Thank you. This is great. Well, whether or not you've read Sand County Almanac, take a look at these words. A thing or a project is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It's wrong when it tends otherwise. Those words jumped off the page at me. Now, Leopold was not talking about city planning. He wasn't talking about railways. Wasn't talking about mobility. He was talking about the flora and fauna out there and our responsibility to our world. But it's the principle that transfers. And so I came to see that railroads inherently tend to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of land and culture. It's inherent. It's almost like a DNA. And railway art, interestingly enough, opens that up for us in a way that we wouldn't expect. I certainly never did, but I learned a lot about railroads and about art as I studied that combination. So a question when you look at a painting is not, what is this a painting of? But the real question is, what is this painting about? We all know what it is of. We can see that. It's a station, it's a train, it's a caboose, it's a railroader. But what's it about? Oh, when you start asking that kind of a question, that gets a little bit deeper. That goes go back to what Georgianne Geyer said in that earlier quote that I had. If we look and see, if we do that, put that energy into it, if we do that kind of work, then we will see what the painting is about. And that is what's missing in a lot of our own culture today. We don't ask that deeper question, what's it about? So we're going to go through about 16 or 17 paintings here, historical railroad art. And we're going to ask that question. I'm not going to take much time with each painting to develop this. I will highlight a few things, but I want you to think of it in terms of what is this painting or these paintings, what are they really about? And where does this integrity, stability, and beauty that Leopold was talking about, how does this painting reflect those things? So we're going to start here with this, The Call of the Mountains. This was a Great Northern Railway brochure advertising Glacier National Park. So what do we have going on there? Well, there's a Blackfeet native, and he is looking at the mountain. That's what the painting is of. A Native American looking at the mountain. What's it about? Well, quite a bit, in fact. You see, I used the word invitational a little bit ago. This painting invites us to Glacier National Park. That's the first level. And to come by train. There's no other way to get there. So we're invited to get on a train of the Great Northern. And even though there's no train in the picture, we're invited to come that way. But then we're invited to look at the mountains. Not just come to the park. We're invited to look at the landscape. But the kicker is this. We're invited to stand there like that Blackfeet guy. We're invited to stand there with our arms up. In other words, we're to see the land as he does. We are to see our responsibility to the land as he does. So you see, when you start asking these questions, you can dig a little bit deeper, and then there is some meat and some understanding. Another glacier piece, this is one that was painted, one of 300, by Vinald Rice, European artist who moved to Montana and was commissioned by the Great Northern to do hundreds of paintings. And the Great Northern Railway used Vinald Rice's Blackfeet portraits on its calendars for years. Here's a Northern Pacific piece. We have advertising, come to Montana, same kind of thing. Take a look at that painting, and you see, if you glance at it quickly, you hardly even see the train. But take a look at this. All this linear strata-like part of the art in the bottom half of this. The way the groves are shown, the railroad embankment, the train. But is the train the important part of that painting? No, it's the mountain and the sky. Look at the way that is rendered is just so captivating. This is the means to this. That's what it's about. And here's an East Coast version of the same kind of thing. This is Storm King Mountain along the Hudson River. It's almost as though we were hiking along the river and we come out onto this sun-splashed meadow just as this southbound train headed to New York comes roaring by. The artist Green here has given us this stunning view of Storm King, and we're invited into that painting. So we go from landscape and art introducing us to landscape and showing us the companionship of the railroad to landscape to architecture. And there are thousands of paintings that we could choose. I just picked this one. Again, there's no train in it. It's not important. But it's the connection of the train to the experience of the land and, in this case, notable historic architecture. So there's another California painting, this one for just advertising California Golden State from the Rock Island Railway. Question for you. Does anybody have an idea of what that painting is literally of? Not now. I'm not going to say what is it about. I'll get to that one in a minute. But what's it of? You got any ideas? North of Marin County, yep, probably so. I don't know. I don't know about that, but we do know it is along the coast. Anybody else want to make any comments about the content now? Not the meaning, but the content. So these people are looking out there. Here's the kicker. You know where they are? They're on the back platform of an open-end observation car. See? At the top, there's the scalloped awning. And if you look beyond these folks in the chairs, you see the vertical posts and the pickets of the gates. They are on the back platform of a train. And are they on their devices? Mercifully, no. What are they doing? They're engaged with the land. How novel. And they're sharing the experience together. That's the communal nature of it. See, there's an element, that's what this painting is about. It's about the shared experience. That's what rail travel can do. And our culture is woefully lacking on that kind of experience, let alone the recognition that it's important. But you see, that's what's going on. That's what the painting is about. It's about connections, about shared experience. Another take on this is a Great Northern ad, and here we are. Now we're not on the platform, we're behind this train, and we see this one rushing toward us, but there again is the back platform of an open-end observation car. Same message now, same message. So there's another realm of where railroads and culture and the confident civic life mesh. It's with kids. One of the cool ads of hundreds, if not thousands, of toy train ads that were used was this one. The dad says, "Son, let's build the finest Lionel Railroad in town." And there they are looking at a catalog. You see? Here's the catalog right in front of them, and the dad's he's pointing there with a pen, and they're thinking about a model railroad. If you look at this piece of art, you see this kind of white kind of stuff that's around here? That's the artist's technique of a dream. The dad and the kid are dreaming about that railroad. They're looking at a catalog, but they're dreaming of what that three-dimensional model railroad is going to look like. See, once again now we're dealing with connections. See? It's not just, oh, it's a catalog, toy trains, oh, that's cool. No. There's a lot more implied. And speaking of kids, I don't know whether any of you ever remember these. I never saw this as a child, but the Union Pacific had these these books out, the children's book of the Yellowstone Bears, and they had all different varieties and all kinds of things. So this is a takeoff on Archibald Willard's painting, Spirit of 1776. And so we have the bears. The kids just ate this stuff up, I guess. Yeah, the onboard crew would hand these things out liberally. Kids just loved it. Here's a Northern Pacific, a New York Central calendar painting that is probably up near Poughkeepsie, it might be near West Point. I'm not exactly sure. But it's obviously a springtime scene, and this kid and his probably sister are on their way home from school or whatever. They go out and they can look down, and so they're waving at the engineman. So again, we're dealing with landscape, and we're dealing with connections and relationships. There's an implied something going on there, except for one little problem. That would be the cat. Now, this is my prejudice shining through, so I am confessing that ahead of time. I'm more of a dog guy. If the painter had put a dog in it, the dog wouldn't have been up here. The dog would have been down there, yapping and barking at the train. The cat is going the other direction, and it's turned its tail up as if it could care less. Well, enough of my prejudice. But anyway, it's a cool painting, and it speaks to that connection. It's not just the adult connection, but it's the kid connection. Then when we got to our military subjects during World War I, in this case World War II, railroad art told an amazing story of connections, again, of relationships, in this case at the national level. This is one of the Pennsylvania Railroad calendars that Griff Teller did not do. This is an Alexander Leidenfrost, and if anybody likes air pollution, there's plenty of it in that. But I grew up in Pittsburgh, so that was common, you know. When the mills were working hard, money was had, and well, we can explore those topics at another time. But the point here is the drama of Uncle Sam with all of this heavy industry, and the railroad is undergirding it. You see, the train is at the bottom, and of course, yes, we have tanks there, we have coal here, but the strength of all of this is built on the strength of this. That's the message. That's what it is about. Another World War II piece, this one, The Kid in Upper Fort. This is a tearjerker of an ad. New Haven Railway published this, and if you were to read it, it would get to you. The point is, we're looking into a compartment on a troop train, and the invitation that is being asked of the viewer here is to please give up your berths so military travelers have a place to sleep. So if you read this whole thing, what we're seeing here is this kid in Upper 4 is awake. His buddies down here are asleep. He's awake, and he's dreaming, thinking about his home and his girlfriend and his parents and of course, will he ever get home again? That's not said, but it's implied. So there's this connection again. This is serious stuff. And the railroads played this to the hilt, and it was very effective. And many, many great pieces of artwork came out of those settings. So moving right along, this is post-war here. Industrial design suddenly came into the railroad world. These are trains that were designed by Brooks Stevens, one of America's great industrial designers. This is a whole booklet advertising the Olympian Hiawatha. I don't know, did any of you ride the Olympian? There was a Milwaukee Road train here. Okay, a couple of you. That's from the Midwest out here. And it was the last transcontinental railway built, and it's the only one to be abandoned. But at any rate, this piece shows to me the railroad people caring about content and caring about their message. So here's the beauty of the equipment of this industrial design that shows up in those this view of the locomotive and the passenger car, the observation car, but also in the whole of this, as the whole booklet. This Art Deco-y kind of treatment is just grand, and the whole booklet is that way. It's a real treat for the eyes. Remember in the picture with the kids and the train a minute ago, the kids were waving at the engineman? That's what we have here. This dude on his horse, and he has his hat up there. He's saluting the engine or the fireman in the cab. That was understood. How many people wave at a bus? Yeah, and airplanes. How many people wave at a train or want to? Everybody. You know, it's automatic, even with us. But see, this is one of those elements that everybody understood. Another, in this case, an interior for the Great Northern. This is a ranch car. These were mid-train lounge cars. Just one comment here. The artist has accurately portrayed this black gentleman as the server. It's unfortunate that Jim Crow was still a very real issue in the 50s, and that showed up in the art. I have not been able to find any railroad art that showed minorities as passengers until the 60s. And when it started in the 60s, it was with photographs, and that's great. I'm glad that they did that. But, this was, you look at what bittersweet kind of stuff. A. Philip Randolph was the head of the Pullman Union. And he worked with Martin Luther King on a lot of racial justice kinds of things. And through A. Philip Randolph, men, mostly men, like this gentleman here, had decent jobs. So just that little parenthetical thing. It's unfortunate that we don't see the role of minorities as passengers or as workers, and even the role of women. That took a while for women to get in. I don't have it in this show, but there are some great ads of women railroaders. One that's in, I think it's in the book, has the one's called Mrs. Casey Jones, and she has a big wrench over her shoulder. You know, it's really a cool painting. Another great northern piece. This again for Glacier National Park. That's Mount St. Nicholas in the background. Which way is that trade gone? Anybody want to guess? Or does it matter? It doesn't matter. No. See, we're invited on board to experience the land. There's the companionship on board and the companionship with the landscape. Here's another cool piece, too. Another dome car piece. This is for the North Coast Limited of the Northern Pacific, a mid-50s piece. Exciting new way to see the Northwest, yes. So, here we have probably a brother-sister combo, and he's pointing at something outside the window to show her. So we have mountains here, we have the train, we have the dome. So what's important? Is it the scenery? Is it the train? Well, that's the context. Is it the people? Completely. Everybody knew this kind of interaction was commonplace. The art of the railroad reminded everybody all the time that was what rail travel was about. It was consistent, and it was, as I have said how many times so far, everywhere. Everybody saw this kind of art. It underscored what everybody knew, and hence everybody took it for granted. One of the last ads of the real passenger train era before Amtrak was this from Santa Fe. It can't write, it can't read, it doesn't have a degree, it never went to school, but after books, it's one of the best teachers of American history. A railroad car. Who would have thought? You know, a few years ago, I was doing this lecture or a version of it on an Amtrak special train, and David Gunn, who was the president of Amtrak at that time, was on board. David saw this, and he said to me, "Craig, where did you get that? I never saw that." And it is a telling piece. And if you read the rest of the text, you get this idea of the train is the means of learning. Try to explain that to people today. Well, we all know what happened, don't we? By the 60s, this. Like your own portable amusement park, dude. It's an old ad for Porsche, but I love it for what it says, because it speaks volumes. If the railroad art spoke volumes, this does too. So look, what's the context? Where's the landscape context? It doesn't exist. What is context? It's just something to blow through or blow by. Like your own portable amusement park. Your own. Are we talking about community here? Hell no. You know, we're not talking about that. We're just talking about what's in it for me. So this is the value that replaced all that railroad art. And don't think that didn't have an effect on our culture. It most certainly did. Now, Winston Churchill's always good for a comment, is he not? We shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. Well, I just tweaked it. The same can be said of our transport systems. We shaped our transportation systems. It wasn't inevitable. We created that sprawl. We did it, and then it shapes us. Enough said. I saw this bulletin board down in Tacoma. At 10, it's news. At 11, it's history. You get it? Think about that. At 10, it's news. At 11, it's history. And I saw that, and I thought, I need a photo of that for my slideshow. But if I go home and get it and come back, it's probably going to be gone. Well, the billboard was still there, and I have it. But you see, as I said here, in our haste and individualism, we've forgotten all this stuff about trains. When the trains went away, so did the art, and so did this message of integrity, stability, and beauty. And the grand art ends up being evidenced in cynical expression. Here we have a T-shirt. Welcome to Washington. State motto, road work ahead. State statue, stop. State flower, the road cone, blah, blah, blah. Kathy and I were at Leavenworth, and I saw this in a store, and Kathy said, I got to get this for Tim, one of our kids. I said, yes, and I need a picture of it to use, because it speaks to exactly what I'm saying. So at this point, we're going to shift from here to the end of the show. We're going to be just dealing with my artwork. And most of this art is going to be from the Northern Pacific Great Northern route across the northern tier, from Chicago to Seattle, and it's art that I have been commissioned to do. So what I'm going to do from here on out is use my paintings to contemporize everything that I have been saying to this point. And I'm going to start with this story. Here's the first version of the painting that's on the book of the cover of the book, and it shows the railway station from 1912 and the big Glacier Park Lodge from 1913. Amtrak's Empire Builder in the front, one of the red buses, and lots of people getting ready to get on. About 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, I was asked to give a lecture on a tour, a bus and train tour, leaving Glacier Park and going down to Yellowstone. It started with an opening dinner and lecture in the lodge, and that is what I want to tell you. Take a moment and tell you this story. So I was explaining to people much of what I've been telling you today. Different contexts, different images, but the themes were the same. And as I was looking out across our audience of about 35, 40 people, I got lots of nods, and I appreciated that feedback. And one couple in the middle seemed to be really following my arguments. There was a chap in the back row. He stuck his hand up, and he said, "Craig, I have a question for you. Do foamers understand what you're talking about?" Foamers? Nobody here knows what you do. If you're keeping your mouth shut, if you know. Most people don't know that term, foamer. It's a derogatory term, generally, and it's used to describe railroad buffs who foam at the mouth just to see a train. And they generally have 18 cameras around their neck so they can take pictures. It's a derogatory term, right? So when I explained it, everybody laughed, just like you just did now. And so I answered and I said, well, at their best, yes. Foamers understand these themes of connectivity, integrity, stability. Actually, it was even before I had that integrity, stability, and and beauty thing. And so we laughed about it, got back on topic, and finished the lecture. Then we got on our buses and rode down to Paradise, Montana, where we met our train. It was being run by the Montana Rail Link. So we got on the train, and an hour into the train ride, we were going along one of these grand Montana streams, and the sun was sparkling off the river. The wheat fields were glowing yellow in that afternoon sun. The mountains were blue in the background. Can I paint it any stronger? You know, it was just one of those captivating days. And we were in a dome car, like I've shown you. In this the one, we had some tables, and we had all this artwork of mine out there. And we were talking about the art, and then talking about the train, and talking about the landscape. Art, the train, the landscape, the connections. Art, train, the landscape, our connections. Art, train, the landscape, and the connections. We were just doing this. And right next to me was the woman who I mentioned earlier, who had been sitting in the middle of the room earlier, and she was gesturing and communicating with me. So she was standing right next to me, and she put her hand on my shoulder, and I looked over, and she had this twinkle in her eye and a wry smile on her face, and she said, "Craig, I think I'm becoming a foamer." Now, she understood. See, she didn't have 18 cameras around her neck to take pictures. She did not want to just foam at the mouth to see the next train. She got the message. All the pieces came together. So everything that I was saying to that group is what I've been saying to you. And at some point, the light goes on. In her case, it did. It made a difference for her, the way she saw the rest of the trip and interacted with the train and all that was related to it. So we're going to move through a bunch of these pictures here. I'm only going to comment about a couple of them, and I invite you to think in your own way. What's this painting about? Or where does the integrity, stability, and beauty fit? So this was a private commission, as was the next one, and I'll show you in a moment how they were used. This is Skycomish, Washington, early 1950s. There was still big steam power. There was electrification that lasted until 1956, and diesel power. And the old powerhouse here is long gone, but the trains, Amtrak's trains, still serve this line at Sky. The next piece, another commission, private commission, shows the Empire Builder on the big Stone Arch Bridge between Minneapolis and St. Paul, with the Pillsbury flower complex in the background. These two paintings were book covers. So this is just one example of how this art has been used. And I'll say this maybe a couple times, but I consider myself exceedingly grateful that I have the opportunity to work with men and women who understand and use this art effectively. It's a real highlight of my artistic career. Here we have a private commission by a private collector, and this is scenic up in the Cascades. This is Highway 2, and we're headed up Stevens Pass. I mentioned the electrification. The Great Northern was electrified until 1956, about that, when they tore it out in favor of the diesels. Now there's talk amongst many about different places where electrification can go back in again. Just one little note, this is a significant image because it's at the Cascade Tunnel, the almost 8-mile tunnel under the Cascades, and the tunnel portal's just sort of around the bend behind the locomotive there. When that tunnel and this new line was opened in 1929, it was a big deal, not just for the state and not just for the railroad, but for the nation. And the event was so important that NBC Radio patched together in one of the first connective radio broadcasts around the country people from New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., I think San Francisco, and Bern here in the Cascades. They had interviews, they had music, they had all kinds of things, and Herbert Hoover, who was the president at that time, greeted the country and talked about the importance of the railroad to the connectivity and the health of the nation. Another Cascade piece, this shows a bridge being built there in the background and a passenger train. This was for a private collector. Another one, similar to, you'll see another Amtrak version of this, where I started with the Amtrak painting, and the client wanted me to put some freight trains in it, which he remembered as a kid. So I got a copy of the painting and painted out the Amtrak stuff and put in the old Great Northern. Kind of fun. This is a relatively recent painting, Burlington Northern's executive train along the waterfront there at Edmonds. This is a private commission. There were a couple of corporate commissions, this for the Montana Rockies rail tours. They no longer exist, but they did run many different tours across Montana, generally from Sandpoint, Idaho, on east to Billings. And I have two paintings that were used, and the style in these paintings echoes that very first painting that I showed you, one of the earlier ones of the trains in the mountains. This was the Amtrak version of the one that had the freight trains in it. Down here in the lower left in both of these paintings was Rocky the goat. Rocky was the mascot for the Great Northern Railway, so it had to have the goat in it, you know. And here the Rocky goat shows up again in a logo. I don't do many graphic kinds of pieces, but this is one of a series that I did for Amtrak. It was really popular, and we were able to, again, reprise Rocky and this setting in a stylized graphic fashion. Amtrak used that in all kinds of ways, and here we see wine glasses and menus and patches and mugs and all sorts of things. So there, again, you see the art continues to speak. I wish that I had more opportunities to do this kind of thing for the company, but I'm very grateful for the many opportunities that I have. King Street Station, this was for the 100th anniversary of King Street in Seattle, with a whole variety of trains, not just Amtrak's. Empire Builder 70th anniversary painting shows the train at Marias Pass with Little Dog and Summit Mountains, and then Belton West Glacier, Essex, which is between Belton and East Glacier, yes, and East Glacier. This is East Glacier Park, and once again, Rocky the Goat and pals show up in the painting. So I've done a number of these, and here's how they used it as a menu with the full painting. The 75th anniversary piece shows the train on Two Medicine Trestle headed eastbound with the mountains in the background. To me, this is my version of that early painting, Companion of Mountains, that I showed you. And the 90th anniversary was a private commission, but Amtrak displayed this and sold copies as well, and that shows the train east of Glacier Park. Another, this near Essex, in the park. Piece from Wenatchee. The company was working with the Washington DOT to do some freight movement, or actually it was movement of produce on special cars on the back end of the Empire Builder. So the Washington State DOT and Amtrak commissioned this painting to show that. It's totally hypothetical. It's supposed to be Wenatchee, where the interchange occurred every day. Interesting thing is, nothing looks like that. That was just, it's artistic. I put it all together, and people loved it, even though the service never happened. The poster was exceedingly popular, and I sold copies for years. It says something about the power of art, doesn't it? This, for the 100th anniversary of Glacier National Park, Amtrak commissioned this piece of the builder along the middle fork of the Flathead. Guardians of the Legacy is the name of the painting, and you can see down here this chap, National Park guy, on a mule. The mule's name is Daisy, and she lived in Bellevue. And the ranger represents the National Park Service. So you see the title, Guardians of the Legacy, immediately goes to this. The Park Service is a guardian of the legacy that is our national parks. But the train is too, because of this companionship and everything that I've been telling you for the last 45 minutes, that it all comes through in that. And here's how Amtrak used it on a variety of products. It's kind of fun. They used it on the menu, and they kept running out of menus on the train. People walked off with the pictures, and whenever I would be on there, it was kind of fun. The steward often would announce in the dining car that I was aboard. People would queue up with their menus and have me sign them for them. It was a real honor to do that. This was the 50th anniversary painting for Amtrak, and it shows a train at Naperville, Illinois. Westbound. In the background is the Sears Tower, the Willis Tower. Now, you really can't see that from Naperville, but I have a telephoto brush. So Amtrak wanted me to do this, and they wanted to get the idea of connections. So we have connections between new and old, older passenger trains over there, the newer ones here, between small town and big city. Between young and old, between crew and passengers. So there's this overlap. So they came to me with that suggestion, and we're right back at the whole matter of companionship that I've been talking about all afternoon. This then was the second version of that earlier painting, and it shows the newer Amtrak locomotives, and this is the cover painting on the book. The most recent Amtrak painting was just released in August, this one, and it is Belton West Glacier with the Empire Builder headed westbound, with the little bit of the evening sun glowing gold on the trees. Come on. There we go. And I get down to the end here with this quote from Tony Judt and bring back the rails. Railways were and remain the necessary accompaniment to the emergence of civil society, and that's what I've been telling you all. If we throw away the railway stations and the lines leading to them, as we did in the 50s and the 60s, we'll be throwing away our memory of how to live the confident civic life. Now, thank you. Think about that. That's the message. There is a connection. These things are companions. And when Judt wrote that, notice this, if we throw away the stations and the lines leading to them. Well, this is a recent painting done for the Midwest High-Speed Rail Alliance. And it shows the rebuilt former Michigan Central Railway Station in Detroit. I don't know how many $1 million the Ford company put into restoring that elegant, elegant building. It's no longer a railway station. It is going to be used for who knows what, public stuff as well as private for Ford company. The High-Speed Rail Alliance commissioned this painting to show what could happen if rail was restored. Actually, the main line is over here. It's not very far away. And if under the right political and business relationships with vision, it would be indeed possible to have high-speed rail. And these trains in here reflect a current Chinese version of high-speed rail. So this is what could happen if the station is restored and the lines leading to them are restored. So I come down here. This is one piece that I did just for myself. I think that the painting is going to be sold at some point. It's the Empire Builder along the upper reaches of the Mississippi River, headed toward Milwaukee and then on to Chicago. The painting title is Will the Fog Ever Lift? And it is referring to the foggy day that I painted there. You know, the view across the Mississippi River there is just absolutely stunning. So the title means, will the fog lift, so the passengers on that train can enjoy that view and understand it. But the title means something more. Again, to go back to Georgianne Geyer and looking, if we look and we see. Well, I'm looking and I'm seeing. The real title that means, will the fog ever lift, refers to our cultural fog that affects our public policy. It affects the nature of the confident civic life. Will that fog ever lift? I don't know. I don't know what it means for you. I don't know what it means for me beyond what I'm doing at the moment. And what I'm doing are these kinds of paintings. I wrote a book. I'm giving talks. How that fits into the grand scheme, this big arc of history and our national world, I don't know. But I know this is what I'm to be doing. And I feel a real joy and honor to be an artist and fit into this piece. So this is the last image that today. This is the cover of Runte's book, Trains of Discovery. That's the same painting I showed you a minute ago. And he said this: artists in particular have done more than present the railroad as historical fact. Rather, they have suggested and convincingly that railroads somehow have fulfilled society's larger dreams and expectations, and that this form of technology still promises the best of national mobility, environmental stewardship, and civil society. So thank you all. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Sir? Yes. I do not. All I know is that it happened, but
30 people that died.
I'm sorry to hear that. I did not know that. Yes.
Well, there's Southern Pacific in California, but coming up the Red River Canyon, they ran it was called the California Zephyr.
Yes.
Did you ever get a chance to ride that?
I did not.
It was incredible.
Yes, it was.
It followed Red River Canyon's about 70 miles long, and at the north end, it would then go east towards, it didn't go into Reno, but it was south of Reno, and you could go all the way to Chicago on it.
Yes, it was the California Zephyr was a combined train, or a train that was run by three railroads that combined their leadership, the Burlington, the Rio Grande, and the Western Pacific. And it was one of the classics.
Yeah.
Yes?
You've mentioned this being a tradition in American painting, the use of art rather than photography. I think I've seen pictures of ads for the British train system that had visual art also.
You
And so
are-
I'm wondering, is this part of an even longer tradition coming to us from across the pond?
It is, indeed. And Kathy and I had the pleasure of being at the National Railway Museum in York, England, a few years ago, and got a tour of the archives, the painting and photo archives behind the scenes. And I was just blown away by the grandeur of that railway art. And then we walked from the museum into the train station, and there was a painting, like my Chinese painting, the one I just showed you. It was just advertising a brand new British locomotive and train, and they used art to tell the stories. That was that fresh. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah,
Can you make any comments about I believe it's called Blue Diamond, that goes from Johannesburg down to Cape Town via the Diamond Mining District?
I wish I had the chance to ride it. A friend of mine has, and just spoke glowingly of the experience. But it's one of those cases where the train, I don't know whether they would consider it common carrier service. I kind of don't think so. It was, it was passenger. 1994 is when I got to ride. I don't know whether it runs as a charter almost kind of thing, or whether it's public service. I don't know, just because it's a high-end train. See, here and in Canada, there's some high-end trains that are available, and you pay bucks up for the experience. It's 5-star everywhere, but you can't ride it as a common carrier. I don't know about that train.
I have a question.
Yes.
What size are your paintings and what's your medium?
Most of the paintings are oil paintings. I do have some ink and watercolor samples over here. I talked earlier about painting the past, painting the present, and painting the possible or the future. Some of that future type art is reflecting an architectural rendering style that I've developed. That's ink and watercolor. Most everything that you've seen here is oil on canvas. And regarding size, it varies from 18 by 24 to 5.5 feet long. It depends on the budget, the time frame, the subject matter, the use. I think most of these things would fit into a 16 by 27 or something like that. Yeah, 18 by 24. Good question. Anybody else? Well, thank you again, and I'll be here if you want to buy a book. There's available, and I have the photo or the paintings that you're welcome to take a look at. Thanks a lot, and a Merry Christmas, eh?